The first time I realized the woods don't care how safe you think you are, I was 20 and camping at the kind of place people bring their kids and dogs and coolers of beer. It was a state park with numbered sites, bathhouses, and a camp store that sold firewood and ice cream. The kind of campground where nothing really bad is supposed to happen. My friend Matt and I had driven up on a Friday in late October, just before they closed the campground for the season. The leaves were mostly down, the air had that cold, wet smell, and there were only 3 or 4 other sites occupied. We joked that we basically had the whole park to ourselves. We set up the tent near the edge of the loop, where our site backed up to a steep drop-off and then thick woods. No other sites behind us, just the tree line and darkness. It felt private, and in the daylight it was beautiful. We spent the afternoon hiking, taking pictures of the empty trails and the fog lifting off the lake. It felt like the entire forest was ours. As the sun went down, we got a fire going, roasted hot dogs, and passed a bottle back and forth. It was quiet in that way it only is off-season. No kids screaming, no generators humming. Just the crackling fire and, faintly, the sound of another group laughing a few sites down the loop around 10. Those other campers put their fire out. Their voices stopped, car doors slammed, and then it was just us. Our fire burned lower. You don't realize how much comfort other people's noise gives you until it suddenly disappears, and you can hear every tiny sound in the dark. It started with footsteps. That's what I thought I was hearing, anyway. Leaves crunching slowly somewhere behind the tent, on the wood side of the site. At first I figured it was a deer. We'd seen plenty of tracks on the trail. You hear that? I asked. Matt paused, listening. A breeze moved the trees. The fire popped. It's a deer or something, he said. Relax. We went back to talking, but I couldn't stop glancing into the shadow where the firelight faded. The tree line was maybe 15 feet from our tent. Beyond that, black. A few minutes later, the footsteps came again. This time, closer. Slow, deliberate crunches in the leaves, like whoever, or whatever, it was didn't care if we heard it. Dude, I muttered. That's not a deer. Matt sighed, got up, grabbed his flashlight, and walked toward the trees. I watched the beam cut through the dark, slicing between trunks, lighting up bare branches and dead leaves. Nothing moved. He swung the light back and forth. See? Nothing. He called over his shoulder. I stood up to get a better look. That's when we both heard it. The sound of something exhaling. A low, long breath, like someone trying to stay quiet after holding their lungs full. Hello? Matt called out, his voice cracking a little. No answer. No crash of an animal bolting away. Just silence, then the wind picking up again. Probably a raccoon, he said as he came back to the fire, but he didn't sound convinced. He tossed another log on, and we moved our chairs a little closer to the flames. We tried to shake it off, but the easy mood was gone. Every stick snap in the distance made my neck tense. Every time the wind shifted, I imagined someone standing just beyond the light, watching. Around midnight, we decided to turn in. The fire had burned down to red coals. The temperature dropped fast, and you could see your breath. We zipped the tent up, crawled into our sleeping bags, and joked about bears and axe murderers for a minute before the cold made us both quiet. The first time I woke up, it was to the sound of fabric moving. At first, half asleep, I thought it was the nylon of my sleeping bag scraping the tent floor as I rolled over. But then I heard it again, and this time I was fully awake. A soft, slow dragging sound, like fingers running along the outside wall of the tent. I froze. Matt was breathing steadily next to me, snoring just barely. I held my breath and listened. The sound came again, moving from the back of the tent, closest to the woods, along the side, toward the door. Fingertips against nylon. A pause. Then again, higher up, like a hand testing the seams, feeling for something. I whispered, Matt. He didn't answer. The dragging stopped. For a few seconds there was nothing but my heartbeat slamming in my ears. Then something pressed into the fabric right above my face. It wasn't a paw. It wasn't a random bump from wind. It was the clear shape of a hand, palm and 5 fingers, pushing in the thin wall of the tent so that it almost brushed my nose. I could see the outline against the faint gray of the sky, feel the cold of it through the material. I choked on my breath and scrambled backward in my sleeping bag, smashing into Matt. He woke up swearing. What the? Someone's outside. I hissed, my voice shaking. The hand pulled away. For a moment, there was dead silence again. Then the entire tent shuddered as if someone had grabbed the top of it and shaken it hard once. Matt sat up, fumbling for his flashlight. He unzipped the tent in one fast motion and shined the beam out into the night. Nothing. Just the dead fire, the picnic table, the car, and the black wall of trees. "Who's there?" he yelled. His voice sounded too small in all that emptiness. The only answer was the wind. We sat there in the open door of the tent for what felt like an hour, scanning the campsite. The beam of the flashlight caught only our breath, drifting white in the cold. No footsteps running away. No branches crashing. It was like whoever had been there had melted back into the woods without a sound. "There's nobody here," Matt said, but he didn't sound like he believed it any more than I did. I noticed then that the hair on my arms was standing up. Not from the cold. From that feeling you get when you know you're being watched. "We're sleeping in the car," I said. Matt didn't argue. We grabbed our bags and practically dove into the back seat of my Civic, locking all the doors. He killed the flashlight, and we sat there in the dark, huddled under blankets, trying to slow our breathing. It must have been half an hour later when I saw it. We'd both started to drift off when a shape moved just at the edge of my vision, out by the tree line. I opened my eyes a little wider and stared. There was someone standing between the trees, just far enough back that the sky behind them made a faint outline. Tall, too thin, head tilted slightly to the side like they were studying the car. I couldn't see a face. I couldn't even be sure they were looking at us. But every instinct in me screamed that they were. I squeezed my eyes shut and whispered, "Don't look out the windows." Matt mumbled, "Why?" Still half asleep. "Just don't," I said. We didn't sleep much after that. Every time I dozed off, I'd jerk awake, convinced I could feel eyes on me. At some point, I must have passed out for real, because the next thing I remember is pale light coming through the fogged-up windows. We stepped out of the car stiff and shivering. The campsite looked normal in the morning. Our tent, our cooler, the dead fire. Until I walked around to the back of the tent. There were prints in the leaf litter around it. Not boots, not clear enough to see tread, but shallow depressions in the damp ground, circling the tent. They came from the woods, stopped inches from the back wall, moved along the side, and then led back into the trees. Right where I'd seen that figure standing in the night, the leaves were disturbed in a way that suggested someone had been there for a long time, barely moving. We didn't bother making coffee. We stuffed the tent into its bag without folding it, threw everything in the trunk, and drove out of that park as fast as the speed limit would allow. I haven't been back to that campground. Honestly, I haven't camped anywhere since. Because the thing that gets me isn't that someone walked around our tent. It's that they had all the time in the world to do whatever they wanted and chose not to, like they were just practicing or deciding. And the woods are full of people who go out there thinking they're alone. The second story isn't about some lonely, half-closed campground. It's about the kind of place people on Reddit brag about, dispersed camping, no neighbors, no fees, just you and a huge national forest. We thought we were being hardcore. It was me, my brother Lucas, and our two friends Mia and Jordan. We were all in our mid-20s, pretty experienced hikers, cocky enough to think we knew what we were doing. We picked a stretch of national forest that allowed backcountry camping as long as you were a certain distance off the road and not near any official sites. The first day went fine. We parked at a small gravel pull-off, hiked in along an unmarked game trail, and kept going until we were well past any sign of other people. The ground was soft with pine needles, and the air smelled like sap and damp earth. We found a flat spot between some big pines, far enough from the stream that the water was just a faint murmur. "This is perfect," Mia said, dropping her pack. We set up 2 tents, one for me and Lucas, one for Mia and Jordan. We hung the food in a bare bag, collected deadfall for a fire, and sat around it as the sun dropped and the forest turned that deep bluish color. No cars, no faint hum of civilization, just crickets and the occasional owl. That first weird thing happened just after dark that we were talking, passing around a flask, when I heard someone whistle. Not a bird. A human whistle. 3 short notes, like a simple little tune you'd use to get someone's attention. It came from somewhere behind my back, deeper in the trees. I stopped mid-sentence and turned my head. "You guys hear that?" "Hear what?" Lucas asked. The sound didn't repeat, so I told myself it was a bird. Or the wind playing tricks. We went back to talking, but every so often, I caught myself staring into the black between the trunks. Later, as the fire burned low, Jordan said he was getting cold and wanted to call it a night. We all agreed. The temperature drops fast out there. We doused the fire with water, stirred the ashes until they were cold, and climbed into our tents. I don't know how long I slept before I woke up the first time, but it was to the sound of that whistle again. 3 notes. The exact same pattern as before. Only this time, it sounded closer, like it was coming from just beyond where our fire had been. I held my breath, listening. Maybe it was Jordan or Lucas messing around. I whispered, "Lucas, you awake?" He grunted. "Yeah. You hear that?" "Yeah," I said. "You think it's them?" There was a pause, then a quiet zipper sound from the other tent, followed by Mia's sleepy voice calling softly, "Guys?" "Yeah, we're up," I answered. "That whistling," she said. "Jordan says it's not him." We all went quiet again. The forest felt like it was holding its breath with us. No insects. No wind. Just the pounding of my own heart. Then, from the dark, the whistle came again. 3 short notes, exactly the same. But this time, it sounded like it was off to our right. Whoever it was, they were moving around us. Lucas started to reach for the tent zipper, but I grabbed his arm. "What if it's some drunk hunter or something?" I whispered. "You really want to step out there without knowing?" We sat in silence, listening. No footsteps. No branches breaking. Just, after what felt like an eternity, the whistle again, now sounding like it was behind my head. "Okay, screw this. I'm looking," Lucas muttered. He unzipped the tent a few inches and peered out with his headlamp on low. I watched the soft cone of light sweep across the empty campsite. The dead ashes of our fire, Mia and Jordan's tent. Nothing else. "Do you see anything?" I whispered. "No," he said. "There's nothing there." As if to contradict him, the whistle came again, louder this time. It sounded like it was right at the edge of our clearing. Lucas swore under his breath and ducked out of the tent, pulling his boots on halfway. His light jerked around the trees, making them seem to lurch and move. Mia's tent zipper opened, and she stuck her head out, eyes wide in the beam. "Jordan, stay put," she said over her shoulder. Then to us, "What if someone's lost?" I wanted to believe that. A hiker off trail, a hunter trying to signal for help. It made sense. Kind of. "Hello," Lucas called out. "You okay out there? Do you need help?" His voice died into the trees. No answer. He took a few steps toward the tree line. "We've got a campfire. If you need help, just say something." The forest swallowed his words. Then, softly, from somewhere ahead of him, the whistle came again. Same 3 notes. Same speed. No variation. No voice attached to it. Something about that, about how precise it was, made my skin crawl. It didn't sound like someone trying to communicate. It sounded like, I don't know, like something mimicking a human sound without understanding what it meant. "Come back," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Lucas, seriously. Please." He hesitated, then backed up toward the tent. "If you're out there and you need help, we'll be here until morning," he shouted one last time. We all sat awake after that, lights off, listening. The whistling stopped. Eventually the normal night sounds slowly returned. A breeze in the needles, the distant rush of the stream, an owl calling far away. One by one, we drifted back into uneasy sleep. Sometime later, I woke up to the feeling that something was wrong, but I didn't know what. The tent was silent. Lucas's slow breathing filled the small space. Shadow of branches overhead. Then I heard the zipper on Mia and Jordan's tent. Not a quick, sleepy zip like someone stumbling out to pee. A slow, almost delicate pulling of teeth. Zip, zip, zip. I tensed, waiting to hear Mia's voice or Jordan's footsteps. Nothing. Just that zipper sound, stopping halfway. Then, after a few seconds, I heard fabric shifting, as if the tent wall was being pushed inward from the outside. "Lucas," I murmured. "Wake up. Now." His eyes snapped open. He must have heard it too, because he didn't ask why. We lay there, barely breathing. The zipper on their tent stayed halfway down. No one came out. I couldn't see anything from our angle, but every hair on my arms was standing up. Then, from just beyond their tent, right at the edge of the trees, the whistle came again. 3 notes. Soft. Almost gentle. Mia's voice came, a shaking whisper. "Jordan, stop it. It's not funny." Jordan's voice answered from inside her tent, much closer to the ground, sleepy and confused. "What are you talking about?" "I'm right here." I will never forget the silence that followed. It felt like the world was holding its breath with us. Then all hell broke loose at once. Mia screamed. The side of their tent bowed inward hard, like something had thrown its weight against it. Jordan shouted. There was frantic movement, and then their zipper was yanked the rest of the way down from the inside as they scrambled out, tripping over each other, crashing into our tent in blind panic. Get out! Get out! Mia sobbed. Someone's there. Lucas and I exploded out of the tent, headlamps blasting light in every direction. Mia clung to my arm, shaking, Jordan panting beside her. Their tent flaps swung open, empty. The beam of my light swung to the tree line. For just a second, at the edge of where our light died into darkness, I saw a figure. Tall, thin, too still, standing between two trunks, just far enough back that the details were swallowed in shadow. It didn't move, didn't run, didn't speak. It just watched. My light trembled. I blinked and it was gone. Or maybe it stepped back into the dark. I honestly don't know. Pack up, Lucas said hoarsely. We're leaving. Now. We broke every camping rule that night. We didn't wait for sunrise. We didn't have breakfast. We shoved gear into packs with shaking hands, left the bear bag hanging, and practically jogged through the trees with our headlamps on high until we hit the faint game trail, then the dirt road, then finally the shining eyes of our car in the beams. We never reported it. What would we even say? Something whistled at us and pushed our tent. No one was hurt. Nothing was stolen. It was just wrong. I've gone hiking since then. Day hikes. Easy trails. But I've never slept in the woods again. Because what bothered me most wasn't just that something, or someone, was out there with us. It was how long it stayed just out of sight, circling, learning exactly how close it could get without being caught. The third story came from the most annoyingly unshakable person I know. I used to work with a guy named Eric who spent his vacations alone in national parks, sleeping in a bivy sack and bragging that campgrounds were for people who need streetlights. The last time he went out, he picked a remote lake in the northern woods, miles from any road, reachable only by canoe and a couple hours of bushwhacking. He said the first 2 nights were exactly what he lived for. Glassy water, loons calling at dusk, a sky so full of stars it made you dizzy. He set up his little one-man shelter near the tree line, left his canoe pulled up on the shore, and cooked over a small, careful fire so no one would ever know he'd been there. He didn't see a single other person. That was the point. On the third night, just after he'd banked his fire and crawled into the bivvy, he heard a sound that didn't belong in that kind of silence. It was faint, carried over the water. It didn't move, didn't run, didn't speak. It just watched. My light trembled. I blinked and it was gone. Or maybe it stepped back into the dark. I honestly don't know. Pack up, Lucas said hoarsely. We're leaving. Now. We broke every camping rule that night. We didn't wait for sunrise. We didn't have breakfast. We shoved gear into packs with shaking hands, left the bear bag hanging, and practically jogged through the trees with our headlamps on high until we hit the faint game trail, then the dirt road, then finally the shining eyes of our car in the beams. We never reported it. What would we even say? Something whistled at us and pushed our tent. No one was hurt. Nothing was stolen. It was just wrong. I've gone hiking since then. Day hikes. Easy trails. But I've never slept in the woods again. Because what bothered me most wasn't just that something, or someone, was out there with us. It was how long it stayed just out of sight, circling, learning exactly how close it could get without being caught. The third story came from the most annoyingly unshakable person I know. I used to work with a guy named Eric who spent his vacations alone in national parks, sleeping in a bivy sack and bragging that campgrounds were for people who need streetlights. The last time he went out, he picked a remote lake in the northern woods, miles from any road, reachable only by canoe and a couple hours of bushwhacking. He said the first 2 nights were exactly what he lived for. Glassy water, loons calling at dusk, a sky so full of stars it made you dizzy. He set up his little one-man shelter near the tree line, left his canoe pulled up on the shore, and cooked over a small, careful fire so no one would ever know he'd been there. He didn't see a single other person. That was the point. On the third night, just after he'd banked his fire and crawled into the bivvy, he heard a sound that didn't belong in that kind of silence. It was faint, carried over the water. A child's laugh. Not a baby's cry that could be mistaken for an animal, but a clear little kid's giggle, the kind you'd hear on a playground. It came from across the lake, where the dark wall of trees rose up on the opposite shore. He froze, listening. Another laugh followed, then a man's low voice, too muffled to make out the words. Then, after a moment, the crackle of a fire. Orange light flickered between the trunks on the far side of the water where, an hour earlier, there'd been nothing but unbroken dark. No engines. No boat motors. No lights before that moment. Just suddenly, a campfire and voices where no trail was marked on the map. He lay there, trying to convince himself some other hardcore campers had just happened to hike in from some angle he couldn't see. But the longer he listened, the stranger it felt. The voices didn't rise and fall in a normal rhythm. There were no distinct words, just murmur, 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 then that same too bright little laugh. Exactly the same every time, like the same sound copied and pasted. At some point the murmur stopped. The laugh came one more time, closer now, like it was right on the near shore instead of across the water. Then silence, heavy and complete. He didn't sleep after that. He lay there until a weak gray dawn started to seep through the trees. When he finally unzipped his bivvy and stepped out, blinking, there was no smoke on the far shore. No sign anyone had camped there. The opposite bank looked untouched, steep and tangled with brush. The water was still and mirror flat. He told himself he'd imagined it. Until he turned back toward his shelter and saw the tree directly behind where he'd been sleeping. In the new light, the bark showed fresh, pale scars, for tall, narrow lines carved into it. Perfectly parallel, from shoulder height down to the base, as if something with long fingers had dragged them slowly down while he slept inches away. That was the last time he camped alone. He still hikes, still fishes, still tells stories about the woods like they're old friends. But if you joke about him being afraid of the dark, he just looks at you in a way that makes the back of your neck feel cold and says, "You ever heard a kid laugh where there shouldn't be any kids?" The fourth story is from a family who did everything right and still left their tent in the middle of the night. A woman I'll call Renee took her husband and 2 kids, 8 and 10, to a free primitive camping area off a Forest Service road. It wasn't totally isolated. There were stone fire rings and flat spots for tents, but no hookups, no ranger, no reservations. When they arrived in the late afternoon, there were a couple of trucks farther down the loop and what looked like an older RV, but no one especially close. They picked a spot a little off to the side, set up their big, brand new family tent, and did all the textbook things. Food in the car, trash packed up, kids never out of sight. By sunset the other trucks' camps were quiet. A faint murmur of country music drifted through the trees, then nothing but the crackle of their own fire and the kids arguing over marshmallows. Renee's husband, Mark, was ex-military and the cautious type. He did a slow walk around their site with a flashlight before they all turned in, checking the tree line, the fire ring, the car. "We're good," he said finally, zipping the tent. The kids were in one side of the big tent, the parents in the other, with a thin divider of fabric and a couple of lanterns between. It was sometime after midnight when Renee woke up to voices. Not far off laughter or music, but low male voices, just outside the tent. The kind of tone men use when they don't want to be heard by anyone but each other. She held her breath, listening. One voice said, very clearly, "The kids are in that one." Another, rougher voice responded, "Truck's got good tires. Bet there's gear in there too." Her blood went to ice. She reached over and grabbed Mark's arm. His eyes were already open. He'd heard it too. The voices moved a little, the sound of boots in the dirt, then a soft metallic clink like someone testing a door handle as gently as they could. Mark's jaw clenched. In one motion, he slipped the handgun from under his pillow, not because he wanted to use it, but because in that moment it was the only thing between his family and whatever was outside. He whispered, barely audible, "Stay quiet. Don't unzip." The kids shifted on their side of the tent, sensing the tension even in their sleep. A shadow passed across the faint glow where the tent fabric silhouetted against the truck. Someone was standing between them and their only way out, close enough that if they'd reached out a hand, they could have pressed a palm against the nylon. Renee could hear breathing that wasn't theirs. Mark took a breath and spoke in a voice he later said didn't even sound like him. Calm, loud enough to carry, with a kind of cold certainty in it. "I see you out there. I'm armed. I've already called the sheriff. If you come near this tent or my vehicle, I will defend my family." For a second, everything froze. Then she heard the shuffle of feet, a whispered curse, and the crunch of someone moving away faster than before. Another voice hissed, "Let's go," farther off in the trees. A truck engine coughed to life somewhere down the dark loop, headlights briefly flashing between the branches, then receding. They didn't wait. They packed in near silence, throwing sleeping bags and clothes into the back of the SUV, collapsing the tent in a clumsy heap. The kids didn't even fully wake up until the car doors slammed and the gravel started popping under the tires. The next morning, after they'd driven straight home and finally slept a few hours, Mark called the county sheriff to report what had happened. The deputy on the phone was polite but non-committal. "We'll send someone to drive through and take a look," he said. No one ever followed up. 2 weeks later, when Renee couldn't stop thinking about it, she looked up that same forest road on a local Facebook group. Buried in the comments was a post from another camper who said they'd found their truck doors open one morning, cooler rifled through, knife stuck into a tree a few feet from their tent. Renee still takes the kids on day hikes. They still roast marshmallows in the backyard and sleep in a tent on the grass, where she can see the porch light and hear a neighbor's dog bark. But if you mention camping in the woods again, she'll tell you she believes in bears and coyotes and bad weather, and that none of those things ever stood outside her tent and talked about her children like they were an opportunity.